So the big question we're faced with on a day like today, or a week like this week, or a month like the month that we've been having is, what do you do when your team is in conference and trade show mode, but hurricanes tell you that you got to stay home? So what we did is, because we're all chomping at the bit to be on the road or in conferences where we're supposed to be. This week's supposed to be at the SMRP in Orlando. Unfortunately, that got canceled. But what we've done instead is we've set up our booth here back at our home base. We've got two of our outside sales managers dialing in through Zoom, and we're going to basically do a mock-up of what we would have been doing had we been able to go to SMRP this week. So behind me here is Robert Dent, and joining us is all remotely is Trig Minnick and Adrian Messer from Orlando, and our Anderson, United States location in Anderson, South Carolina. So we've got our booth set up here. We've got on the right-hand side of our booth, we've got our portable permanent monitoring systems, not portable, our permanent monitoring systems. In the middle here, we've got our handheld data collectors, and then we've got a Zoom over here where we can take a look at the different software applications that make these things sing. Robert, I'm going to start with you. If I was coming to your booth today in SMRP and I wanted to know something about these portable instruments, what could you tell me? I see we've got 5 different handheld data collectors here.
Well, I guess, in reality, the first thing I'd ask you is, what problem are you trying to solve? But as this is a mock-up of a trade show, we'll do it a little bit differently. But what we have in front of us is the latest and greatest from SDT, from our acoustic lubrication specific devices like the LUBExpert. We have the 340 at the front, which is our latest and greatest high definition, high resolution ultrasonic data collector. And then we have a tried and true 270, which I think is coming up to its 15th anniversary pretty soon.
Happy birthday.
Exactly. That's been a staple of our products for a long time, and thousands of devices out in the marketplace, or thousands of customers using that device for their ultrasonic needs. Then we have the checker line here at the back. And then we have our acoustic imaging camera, SonaVu Plus, which is actually proud to announce the release of the SonaVu Plus.
All right, well, I have an issue with electric motors being overgreased. A lot of bearing failures. I got a bunch of guys running around with grease guns. It doesn't seem like they're really in sync with any kind of a program at all. So I've got 5 different, I heard you say lubrication on one of these. Which one of these products am I going to need? Because I don't need all 3 of them. One of these must be able to solve my lubrication needs.
Well, I'm happy to be able to tell you that actually 4 of these devices could help you with that application. Not only does the LUBExpert allow you to perform precision acoustic lubrication, but our checker range, our 270 and our 340 all have the ability to perform acoustic lubrication as well. Really depends on the sophistication of where you want to go with your program. LUBExpert specifically designed, and the LUBExpert is really about a precision lubrication program. So now we're getting into the specifics of the type of bearings that are going to be in these assets, the type of grease you're using, which grease gun you're going to use. It is really getting, to that point of establishing a well-defined world-class lubrication program. 270 has the ability for the LUBExpert functionality to be added. So if you want a device that can do acoustic lubrication, but does also give you the functionality for performing your other applications with an ultrasound device, the 270 is the way to go. 340 is more focused on the analytical side. So high resolution, high definition data. You can perform acoustic lubrication with the device. It doesn't give you all of the in-depth criteria set up for precision lubrication, but it's going to give you the added information for root cause analysis. Checkers at the back here, very simple. You grease while looking how the friction changes based on whether the ultrasonic signal goes up or down. So very much a immediate feedback, but no ability to record the data and store it and trend it. So we got 4 devices for you to choose from. Depends on how deep you want to get, how far into world class you want to get.
Okay, so I've got 4 to choose from. Trig Minnick, you are coming to us from a lubrication background. My understanding is some of the previous places you've worked, you've been deep into the lubrication weeds. So you're visiting a client and you got 4 of these instruments with you in your trunk, and that client specifically wants to get into a lubrication program. Where are you going to lead that? Where are you going to lead that discussion? How do you determine which of these 4 options are going to be the best for that client?
Yeah, there's a lot of variables that come into play. Obviously, their objectives, their budget, how they like to operate. Is manpower a bigger limiting factor, or is their spending capital type of budget more of a limiting factor? And also, is the equipment in question, is it heavily guarded? Is it accessible? So the OnGuard, one of the newer products since I've been with the company a relatively short time, is a great product for those applications that are either highly critical and or are guarded. I know that there's been talk in the mining community about more and more regulations about being able to access equipment while it's running. And so OnGuard is a great solution for that, because not only does it give them the condition monitoring, give them the decibel form and all that, but also the constant staying in the right amount of lubrication, because both over and under lubrication are bad and cause additional wear, additional heat, additional power consumption, even potentially on equipment. So the OnGuard from that standpoint is very good. However,
okay, well, hold on. Now we're talking about the portable devices and specifically the LUBExperts, but you've introduced the OnGuard here. So let's have a little chat about that then. I see LUBExpert OnGuard on this box here. If I open this up, this looks like a nice hermetically sealed panel that I could put in my dirty, dusty facility. What's going on inside here, Trig?
So, the short version of that is that's the brains of our standard LUBExpert device, and it will help us set up parameters, notifications, and alarms and limits based on the friction level, and when we want that friction level to determine if we're going to send a signal to an automatic lubricator to activate that automatic lubricator, which is a way more concise and real indicator than the old, OEM standards of here's the calculations and here are all these correction factors, which are highly subjective and open for interpretation for the user, but have big impact on how frequent and or how much grease we would apply. So OnGuard, like all of our other devices, is going to actually listen for the ultrasound signal, really listening for a friction change to determine when we should add grease automatically in this case.
Okay, all right. So let's zoom in here, because we've got an automatic lubricator mocked up here. So it looks like some kind of a grease cartridge, but most grease cartridges I've seen have some kind of a timing device. This looks like it has more like some kind of an impulse controller on it. And this looks like our ultrasound sensor. So maybe, Adrian, if you could speak to, we want to hear your voice too. If you could speak to what we're looking at here and how this is communicating with LUBExpert OnGuard, please.
Yeah, sure. So we've basically taken the concept of our portable handheld LUBExpert and turned that into an automated system. And, if you think about all the reasons why bearings fail, there's really 4 main failure modes. There's over lubrication, under lubrication, using the wrong grease for the wrong application, or using different greases that aren't compatible with each other, and then lubricant contamination. So this system actually prevents the top 4 failure modes for bearings, because we're now precision lubricating it to make sure we're not over or under lubricating. We're using the same grease every time we grease that bearing, and then everything is contained in the single point lubricator in the grease line, so we've reduced the risk of contamination. So you get the benefit of 24/7 bearing monitoring with our Conmon Sense sensor. And then when ultrasound senses an increase in friction, meaning the bearing needs grease, that then triggers the series of events that starts the single point lubricator that's going to apply precise amount of grease a little bit at a time until that friction level comes back down to the normal or baseline level.
So this sounds kind of like I'm looking at a feedback loop here then. This ultrasound sensor connected to my bearing is basically the ears that are listening to that bearing 24/7. And we're feeding that into the LUBExpert OnGuard brain here. And when that brain encounters something that's, say, an anomaly or not something within the normal operating conditions, the feedback loop is back to our automatic lubricator, where we can impulse micro doses of grease to the bearing. Is that right?
That's exactly right. And it's only going to do that. So there are some safety measures built into the algorithm. So it's only going to apply a certain amount of grease. And if that friction level, for whatever reason, does not come back down, that's when it will then throw or flag the bearing is in alarm. And then it also has a way to eliminate false positives. So if you're in a situation where maybe you have something that's on a conveyor, like a bucket elevator, and if for whatever reason something heavy goes across the conveyor, or there's an anomaly that causes or a spike in the decibel level, it has to hold for a certain amount of time before that lubricator will trigger and start the greasing process. So there are some safety measures built into it that will prevent it from applying too much grease or applying grease to a bearing based off of a false reading or false positive.
In the old school way of doing things, if I walk into the plant as a lubricator, I got a grease gun, I've got an ultrasonic meter attached to that grease gun, and I'm there live in the field, and I can hear and feel and sense things that are happening in real time. Now I've installed this in my plant, and I've switched off the lights and I've walked away, so I'm not there anymore. How can I see remotely what's going on with my LUBExpert OnGuard? Is there some software that I can watch this?
Sure. There's a web-based platform. We can actually set up and build the dashboard for you, so you can view that at your leisure from anywhere in the world. Anywhere you have an internet connection and have the ability to hop online, you can view that data in real time.
So we're zooming in on that now, Rob. Maybe you could walk us through what we're looking at, because this is the information that we're going to see.
Okay, so what we're looking at on the screen here is the graphical user interface that is built into the OnGuard system. So the system itself is designed to reside on the customer's Ethernet network. There is an Ethernet port directly in the PLC, or we can connect it to a router to allow for remote access for viewing of the data. And we basically can connect into the dashboard. We can select the specific channel that we're interested in. And here I've kind of set it up in a split screen so we can see what's going on live, as well as the status of this particular bearing that we're looking at. So on the right-hand side here, we can see the dB value. We can see the alarm set point. We can see when it was last lubricated. There's a bunch of information here. But on the left, what we're actually doing is we're looking at kind of a real-time view. So the blue line here is the RMS, or the dB value, the friction level coming from the bearing. And when it goes into alarm, or goes through the alarm threshold, it's triggering the single point lubricator. And you can see right now, it's actually on the right-hand side, you can see that it's ongoing, going through the lubrication process. So when it goes into alarm, it'll give it some grease. It'll see how the friction changes. It'll give it some more grease as long as the friction is coming down, and it will adjust itself to the point where the friction has come down to the bottommost amount. And when it starts to go up again, it's going to stop the process. And then it will record that information, store it in the historian that's right on board. And across the bottom here, if you zoom in, it actually records how much grease was put in during each lubrication event. So all of that good information is stored right on board.
When I'm greasing in the field and I feel a little bit of back pressure in my grease gun, it's telling me I've got a blocked tube or something's impeding the flow of grease. This isn't a human being anymore. Is there anything in there to prevent the thing from pumping grease and the grease not being able to flow?
Yeah, so that as Adrian kind of talked to, there are some safety measures in place. One of them being the fact that, we can avoid false positives. The other one is that when we try to lubricate the bearing, if there's no change, one of the things that can cause no change is back pressure, can't get any grease to the bearing. It will attempt to put grease in a couple of times, but because it can't, it's going to stop the process and basically go into alarm. And at that point, that customer is then able to see that there is an alarm in the system, and they can go and investigate. So the system does have those fail safes kind of built in, so you're not just going to continue to kind of try and pump grease in.
Oh, that's pretty cool. And what about when that grease cartridge is empty?
So again, if we zoom in on the right-hand side, you can actually see there is an indicator here as to how much grease is left in the cartridge. So this is actually changing real time. So as grease is being deployed, the amount of grease left in the cartridge is being recorded. When it reaches a certain percentage, 10%, it's going to actually go into alarm as well. Not a red alarm to stop the process, but an orange warning. And there'll be a notification that the grease level is low.
That's a relief, because I asked the question because I've seen lots of pictures on the internet, on LinkedIn and whatnot, of grease cartridges that have been sitting there for months and months and months in an empty condition. And it's that whole set it and forget it mentality so we've thought of that part of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trig, back to you. What kind of a price point am I looking at here? Like, is this something that I can go and install on every single bearing in my plant?
I suppose it is possible, feasible. It might not be the best solution for you overall, especially if you already have a team in play. The on-guard can send signals over long distances, and so from a possibility standpoint, sure. However, you might find that using your route-based for many of your applications is the better way to go. It really depends on your manpower issues and availability, which one is the better option for you, the way I would look at it.
Adrian, how about you? Does criticality play a factor in how you decide where the LUBExpert on-guard is going to be deployed?
Yeah, absolutely. So if people are just starting out, I always recommend to default to asset criticality. Where we have seen a lot of success with the LUBExpert on guard so far has been on assets that are, highly critical, but yet out of sight, out of mind. So they're places that you would not want to send a technician on a regular basis, whether it be, they're having to climb up several stories, so there's safety related issues. So those are all things that come into play. But yeah, certainly default to asset criticality, and then also just assets that are out of sight, out of mind, but yet still need to be monitored in some form or fashion. And if you can do that without having to put somebody at risk, then that's even better.
So in terms of the number, because this looks like a fairly expensive setup here to just monitor one bearing. Is this setup here just going to monitor one bearing, or can I run multiple machines into this?
Yeah, you can run multiple machines. So each LUBExpert on guard can handle up to 8 sensors and 8 single point lubricators. So you have the ability, for instance, if you wanted to monitor a set of 4 motors, then you've got the ability to do that with one on guard system.
Okay. Now I'm thinking of another scenario where I might want to just have this LUBExpert on guard. I'm thinking of a scenario where I wouldn't want to have it permanently mounted on the wall, but I might want to move it around from one asset to another. Rob, I don't see any solution here for that. Is there a way that we could configure this so that I just put it on an asset for a few weeks or a month?
Yeah, unfortunately, we didn't have enough room in the car to bring all of the toys today, but we do have what we call the LUBExpert on-guard mobility system. So that is contained in a rugged ABS Pelican case. And yeah, as you refer to the brochure, it's going to give you some information about it there. But it is designed to be portable. You can move it from asset to asset, be able to monitor 4 channels, up to 4 bearings. So 4 ultrasound sensors, 4 single point lubricators, the cables required. They all plug into the side of the LUBExpert on-guard mobility. You can put it there for a certain period of time. And when you're done, you can unplug it all and move it to a different asset. So we actually had a situation, customer had 6 weeks to a shutdown. They had a critical asset they were concerned about. So we brought in the the on-guard mobility, hooked it up, monitored those critical bearings for that 6 weeks. The system lubricated it when required, and they got it through to the shutdown. And when they were done, just packed it all up and moved it on. So
nice. And did they save the bearing?
Yes, they did.
And was there a lot of interest in the health of that bearing?
Yeah, I mean, this was a critical asset, needed to run 24/7 to fire up a boiler. So that asset going down basically would take the whole plant down. So ensuring that asset was running and those bearings stayed precision lubricated was highly critical. So
I asked a question, but I actually have heard this story before. So I asked this from a point of knowledge, because my understanding is that every suit in that plant had the IP address of that LUBExpert on-guard mobility system keyed into their cell phone, and they were everybody was watching it 24/7.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, around the horn now, I want to, because all of you guys are involved with field sales and field demonstrations, what type of industries are you seeing the most interest for LUBExpert on-guard? Adrian, start with you.
Yeah, we have had a lot of success in pulp and paper. Any type of aggregate industry, whether it be, rock quarry, mining, cement plants. You think about some of the harshest, most challenging types of environments, and that's where we've had the most success thus far. And it kind of relates back to what I was talking about earlier with contamination. Single point lubricators alone are okay as long as they're tuned correctly, as long as they're maintained. But our single point lubricator is powered by the on-guard, so there's no battery. So it's just one less thing to go wrong with it. And then, as Rob said, the dashboard where the data goes monitors how much grease is left. So in a sense, you have the ability to not only monitor the health of the bearing, but also the single point lubricator. So, those are just some of the types of industries and areas where we've had the most success with this thus far.
Thanks, Adrian. Trig, how about yourself? What types of industries have you demonstrated on-guard to, and where do you see it getting the most traction?
Certainly everywhere that Adrian mentioned. Also, I would say power generation has been a big one. Building products, whether that's insulation to roofing. And the thing is, the product fits for almost every manufacturing facility because it's not specific to their machinery setup. I mean, we're looking at monitoring bearings, and that applies across, well, pretty much every manufacturing industry, just about. So it's pretty wide ranging, but I think we've hit on the key ones that we've seen the most of anyway. Food and beverage as well, yeah.
Yep. Okay. And Rob, does that pretty much cover it, or have you touched some industries that Trig and Adrian didn't mention?
No, as Trig said, I mean, this is viable for pretty much any facility, any industrial manufacturing facility. They didn't really leave me too many industries left to talk to, but from personal products to pulp and paper to cement to oil and gas, I mean, this literally can play anywhere. So
let's speak specifically about the sensor, because this isn't your everyday ultrasound sensor that it looks a lot like the same sensor that comes with the LUBExpert, the 340, the 270, even the Ultra Checker. What's different about this sensor?
So this is our Conmon Sense, or part of our Conmon Sense range. So Conmon being a shortened version of condition monitoring. So this is a specifically designed sensor, which is really been engineered to work with continuous monitoring systems, especially in the PLC world. Really fits into the IoT space as well. 4 to 20, 0 to 10 output, so the heterodyned output right from the sensor. So in this particular one, this is our 4 to 20 true, which has been specifically designed to work with the on-guard system or with some of our other systems here, and it will automatically establish the correct gain setting, and will send that 4 to 20 milliamp signal back to whatever it is communicating to. It's going to give an overall based on the heterodyned output. Just great for this kind of application.
Well, then tell us what this is, because it says Vigilant on it. I have a feeling that somehow this common sense sensor marries itself up to this Vigilant.
So, yeah, great question. The Vigilant system. Now we're kind of moving into data acquisition for dynamic data, for doing root cause analysis, more in-depth signal analysis type work. So some of our common sense range has the dynamic output capability. So we can bring these directly into this little pod here, and this has the ability to actually capture the time waveform. We can post-process it in the software, which is built right on board the system, and be able to show, your fast Fourier transform or your spectrum for doing signal analysis as well as the waveform. We can bring in static information as well, but the great thing about this device is it's not specific to one particular technology. We can bring vibration sensors into this. We can bring ultrasound sensors into this. We can bring process parameters into this. So now we can gather a whole bunch of different machinery information to trend and analyze. Very, very useful. And this is actually our mobility unit. So this is good for moving from asset to asset when you're trying to really nail down a specific problem on a critical piece of machinery.
So like the LUBExpert On Guard, this is in a mobility case, but also you can put it in a permanent case too?
Yeah, so you can install it permanently for permanent continuous monitoring on an asset as well. But again, that ability to combine ultrasound and vibration in one device, super powerful, especially when you're dealing with slow speed applications where, vibration for the motor, maybe you've got a gearbox that's taken it down to very low speeds, and then you've got the ultrasonic side that's going to handle the slower speed. Now you combine the two, look at all of the data in the same place. So again, this is kind of a self-contained unit. We connect to this via over the internet, either directly on Ethernet on the customer's network, or in the bottom here, carefully hidden, is a little router under here. So we can actually put a SIM card in here. We can actually hook this up anywhere in the world and connect to it via cellular network, and we can see the real-time data that's stored directly on this device.
Have you put this up in any windmills?
We have, actually. It's funny you should ask that question, but that's actually a prime location for it. Again, you've got the slow speed side on the main bearing through the complex planetary stage of the gearbox, and then out to the generator on the other side, so you can transition from kind of ultrasound to vibration all the way through the asset. So it works really well.
Treg, Adrian, where are you guys seeing the most traction for Vigilant right now in the field?
Yeah, kind of some of those same areas and industries that I talked about previously. And, we are seeing a lot of interest in the mobility because a lot of, I think about, air handler units. I think about, overhead crane applications to where, we need to monitor it, but yet we can monitor it for a couple of months or so, and then we can move it to another asset. So again, highly critical assets that are, again, out of sight, out of mind, but yet still need to be monitored, and better to have them monitored by something like a Vigilant mobility than to have to send a tech up to an area where there's going to be a potential for greater risk of injury due to distance or heights. Accessibility
seems to be a big theme. I know talking to some of the guys at like Michelin and at Kimberly-Clark, where I know that these are deployed, and that's one of their biggest challenges, isn't it? Is the safety aspect of it. Is more and more things are getting guarded. Robotics, you can't get access to them. Everything's behind either plexiglass or fences nowadays. So this is a great way for for clients to get the data on the assets without putting their operators or their condition monitoring team in risk. How about you, Trig? Have you had many clients interested in the Vigilant?
Yeah, there's some. It tends to be very specific type of situation with access, grain elevators. In the food industry, certainly we have grain elevators are a good application for it. In the mining side, there's a lot of remote and difficult to access applications in mining. One that I came across recently was a telescopic conveyor for shipping material out onto the barge, and I thought that was a pretty interesting situation. I had not seen many of those before, but yeah, certainly that was another discussion for the Vigilant.
Interesting. All we've talked about so far with these two permanent monitoring solutions, both LUBExpert On Guard and Vigilant Mobility, is we've been talking about rotating assets, but I'm going to pull Rob Dent back into this one again, because I know for a fact that the Vigilant can go so much deeper than rotating assets. And so I'd like you to speak to one project that you worked on with Anglo American in Brazil on some pretty critical electrical transformers. I understand that if one of those transformers fails, they're looking at somewhere between 18 and 24 months turnaround to get a new one. So tell us about that application, Rob.
So talk about critical, for sure. And there's obviously a huge safety aspect. But one of the beauties of ultrasound is the ability to perform electrical inspection. Another member of our ConmonSense family is not structure-borne, but it's airborne. So through actually a combination of structure-borne and airborne ConmonSense sensors hooked to a Vigilant, we're actually able to look for partial discharge, monitor those electrical assets for any sign of electrical issues. So, strategically placed airborne sensors pointing at insulators, pointing at the lines coming in, as well as structure-borne sensors mounted to the transformer itself. Permanently monitoring, continuously monitoring, plus taking a snapshot of the data as well. But not just ultrasound, we're actually monitoring temperature. We're actually looking at the quality of the oil as well. So combining all of that data into a really beautiful package designed specifically for electrical applications.
So we had sensors mounted on that transformer that were giving us an indication of the quality of the oil in the oil field transformer.
Yep.
Also, we had specific spots where we were concerned about overheating and temperature issues. All of those parameters were being fed into the Vigilant. The Vigilant was the brain. The Vigilant was on watch for all of those different parameters.
Yeah, exactly.
So how many Vigilants did it take to monitor one transformer?
One Vigilant per transformer, but multiple transformers. So, you end up with, 14 or 15 critical assets being monitored across the facility.
So we had 8 ultrasound inputs. We used all 8 ultrasound inputs. Some of them were contact, some of them were airborne.
Yes.
And with the 4 static inputs, that's where you were monitoring the oil?
Yes, correct.
How did that, do you understand? Do you have any recollection how that was done?
Well, it's actually using a specific sensor that is designed for looking at the oil quality. And it's just, again, a 4 to 20 milliamp output or a 0 to 10 volt output that we're able to bring in and calibrate through the system, so we can actually take the information being provided through that sensor and make sense of it. We also brought in a thermography camera as well, so the output from the thermography
you connected
camera,
a thermography camera to this thing.
So through, again, thermography camera with a 4 to 20 milliamp output, we could feed information back into this as well. So pretty sophisticated little device, but huge capability.
Man. Vigilant and versatile.
Very much so.
Crazy. Oh, what is an ULTRASentry? That
So,
looks new.
so this is a little product that really kind of fits in between portable data collection and high-end analytical continuous monitoring. So the concept here is you have a little device like this. This is actually a radio transmitter. So now we're taking data from assets, transmitting them via radio back to a centralized gateway. So we've got a very short cable, which is mounted to our sensors. This is super useful when you're dealing with assets that are out the way, hard to get to. Maybe they're in remote stations that people just don't go to very often. We have the ability to transmit the data via radio back into a gateway. We can monitor up to about 240 points, bring it back into a centralized historian for trending and alarming and email notification, and gives that customer real-time, not continuous, but more frequent data to really keep an eye on the assets and what they're doing. So when it comes to bearings, high frequency, short wavelength information from ultrasound sensors are going to tell them when bearings start to wear and when the friction changes. So now you've got feedback remotely from the bearings to say, hey, someone needs to go out and do an investigation, take a grease gun with them, maybe it's a greasing issue, or take your 340 with you, take some more analytical data. So we can now get into a situation where, especially if we have some hard to get to assets, lack of manpower, we can put sensors out there in remote locations and get good feedback on a more regular basis than someone having to drive out there or go out there once a month.
That gets me thinking because, and maybe I'll get Adrian to comment on this. Like, what I'm thinking right now is that if my lube technicians have a specific route that they have to follow, maybe they've got 35 or 40 lubrication tasks to perform in a morning. They get to those tasks, and as they approach the asset, they find out that, well, the asset actually didn't need lubrication because they're using their LUBExpert. They get to that asset and the LUBExpert says, sorry, the alarm wasn't triggered. Don't put any grease in it. Seems to me like the guy just made a wasted trip. If I have 40 bearings to grease and 30 of them aren't in an alarm state, I've just wasted a whole bunch of time. How could ULTRASentry save me from wasting that time, Adrian?
Yeah, I mean, think about all the time that you wish you could get back from PMs that were done that had no value. And that's the case with time-based lubrication. Typically time-based lubrication is too much too often. So our people are out greasing bearings that in most cases don't even need grease. So when you deploy ultrasound, now we're only greasing it when ultrasound tells us that it needs grease. So it is more precise, and then we're able to add grease correctly and in the correct amount. So where time-based may say one certain amount, but yet with monitoring it with ultrasound and monitoring the ultrasonic friction levels, it may be something totally different, and usually it's less. So it is a way to save time, and you can now have those technicians out doing more productive work as opposed to going out and greasing bearings that don't need grease.
So ULTRASentry is going to save me from sending lube technicians out to assets that don't need to be greased.
That's right.
What does that look like in the lube manager's room, Rob? What is ULTRASentry? What kind of data is ULTRASentry wirelessly sending to the lubrication manager?
So the information, based on the time interval that's been set up, and that is completely user definable. That information is coming back to a little historian there on the gateway. So there's a web app that is allowing the user to actually see the trend of the information. So he can see, the most recent decibel values that are coming in. He can trend it, and he is actually able to set alarms on the data. So he can set alarm thresholds. This will provide an alarm, an email notification when it goes into alarm. we can actually come in here and we can make notes in the historian as well. So if we know that we came out here and we actually greased the bearing, we could type in some information in here to let the technician know, or the technician, that that bearing was greased. Now that information is saved to that particular point. Now you've got a historical record of when an event occurred, and it could be, you know, the bearing was changed, the bearing was greased, whatever the case may be. But again, you've got your asset hierarchy. It's going to show you your assets, and it's a very simple green light, red light type scenario where, you know, green is good, you don't need to worry about it. But when something goes into alarm, now you've got that notification, you know, do I go out and grease it now, or do I go out and do some further investigations? So.
Okay, so now there's a kind of a trade-off or a balance between the cost per point of installing all of these sensors versus the labor savings of sending somebody out into the plant to do work that didn't necessarily have to be done. And it's not like we're trying to replace that person with, you know, something that's more automated. What we're trying to do is we're trying to make that person's time more effective, and maybe find more useful, more meaningful work for them to do, rather than just, as Adrian said, these blind PMs that serve no value.
Well, one concern we hear from customers on a regular basis is there's, you know, a lot of time and a lot of expenses being used to go out and collect data, which is really good data. So data from assets which are in good, healthy condition. And, you know, that time is taken, it costs money to do that. So by using something like ULTRASentry, where we can install sensors on our assets and get information about their current status, we can then really maximize the efficiency of our time by going out to investigate the ones that are actually telling us, hey, I've got something going on. So now we're not just going out and collecting data for the sake of collecting data. It's automatically being collected. Now we're actually being told to focus here or here based on the feedback from the machine. So, you know, it's really about the machinery guiding us to where we need to go. We are way more efficient that way.
So back to the LUBExpert On Guard. One question I have, because this is new, this is revolutionary. I've got to go back to my plant and convince my boss to spend some money. And I imagine this is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,000 plus per channel. So then I've got to deal with the installation costs, the implementation costs, and training on how it gets used. Probably looking at about $12,000 to $15,000. Does that sound about right, Adrian, to get an 8-channel system going?
Yeah, that's definitely in the ballpark. There are some variabilities based on the type of grease that you're going to need, which we can spec out the grease. You just let us know what you need and we can include that. There may be some variability with cable lengths, for example, but yeah, that's definitely the range that's in. But we also...
I've got a CapEx problem, though. I'm not going to be able to get $15,000 approved quickly. And I'd like to get this thing in my plant. And I mean, the proof's in the pudding. How can I prove this out to my managers that this is something they need to sign up for right away?
Sure, we thought about that as well when we released this. So we have a 1-month trial. So if you're highly interested in it and you have no doubt that it's going to benefit you and it can help improve reliability, you can get a 1-month trial of a 4-channel mobility system. So you get all the hardware, you get the 4 sensors, the 4 single point lubricators, even the grease. You let us know what type of grease you need, and it'll come with a pack of grease cartridges. And you can do that for $1,500 for 1 month. And then if you decide, you know, hey, this is working great, we'd really like to get this in our plant, then your investment in the rental price is going to be deducted from the purchase price.
Sounds like a great deal.
Yeah.
I definitely would get very little friction to get a signature for a trial. And I think a month is more than long enough for me. But what if I need it longer than a month?
Yeah, we're flexible on the time. So if you need to keep it, 6 weeks as opposed to 4 weeks, then we can certainly accommodate that.
Nice. That's a great way that I can get my feet wet on LUBExpert On Guard without having to run a CapEx project. All right. So one of the first applications for ultrasound has always been, first and foremost, its ability to find compressed air leaks in noisy facilities. So we can talk about rotating assets. We can talk about the steam traps and lubrication till we're blue in the face. But this is really the bread and butter application that I started with 35 years ago. Adrian, you've been involved with ultrasound sales for a long time as well. Why should I be interested in a compressed air leak management program? Why should I care?
Yeah, what a lot of people don't realize is for what it takes to produce it and what you get out of it, compressed air can a lot of times be considered to be the most expensive utility in any plant or factory. It takes approximately 3 horsepower of mechanical power to produce 1 horsepower of compressed air power. So any leaks on the system is going to decrease the efficiency of the system. And it's pretty much a given. I've heard it from every compressed air company out there, but it's going to be at a given. A minimum of 30% of the compressed air generated is lost to leaks. So even brand new installations, which I've gone in a lot of times after brand new installations, and you find leaks. So a lot of times the quickest ROI for ultrasound is going to be simply from compressed air leak management programs. So you're able to not only find the leaks, but you can then quantify how much those leaks are costing you. So it's going to be based off of your specific type of compressor. So then your cost per kilowatt hour of electricity, so how much it's costing you to generate 1,000 cubic feet of compressed air. The decibel level, so that leak is creating noise. So we measure that noise in the decibel level on board any of our instruments. So you simply use the decibel level and then the pressure at the leak site. And our free download leak reporter app will actually generate the report for you. So not only can you find the leaks, but you have a complete reporting tool that will generate you a really nice PDF document of each individual leak, the loss information, as well as a photo showing where the leak is.
Okay. So Robert, I can use this SDT 340 to find leaks. I can use the 270. I can also use the checker as either an ultra checker or a leak checker. These are all single resonance sensor, airborne sensors with pretty decent ranges. Speak to me, because I didn't have, my very first paying job inside SDT was actually a compressed air leak survey of a steel plant in Whitby, which is now owned by Brazilian Gerdau. And I'm proud to say that plant is still in business 35 years later because I found all their compressed air leaks in 1992.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm sure they would have shut down by now. I didn't have the benefit of an acoustic imaging camera in 1992. I had to find everything the old-fashioned way. I find the leaks, tie a yellow ribbon around the pipe, and then hope that somebody came along later and fixed it. Speak to me about the SonaVu, Robert. How is this going to make my life better as someone who's interested in reducing compressed air leaks in my facility?
Well, with the, ever onward improvements that are being made to technology, we now have the ability to overlay the ultrasonic signal to a camera image. So now not only does it make it super easy to find sources of ultrasound because they're going to show up and visually be able to be seen on the screen, but it makes it super fun too. I mean, you put this in the hands of any inspector and they're like, oh my goodness, this is awesome. I love this. Now I can find everything. But what's important to remember is that ultrasound is being generated by friction impacting and turbulence. So we also need to be able to hear what is generating that ultrasound. one of the great things about the SonaVu Plus is that the heterodyned output is also being captured. So we can hook up a set of Bluetooth headphones, or there is a place to plug in on the side here, so I can listen to the ultrasound. So beautiful for when I'm out doing leak detection. You know, I can hear that of the compressed air leak. But if I find something that isn't a compressed air leak, it's going to give me a different sound signature, so I can filter that out. So it's not going to kind of blind me to thinking that it is a leak when it's actually something mechanical or something friction based. So quick example here, if I turn on this little compressor here and generate a leak, you'll be able to see on the image on the screen, and you can see actually we've got it hooked up to a TV here. So you should be able to see right on the screen, either way, the generation of the leak here. Super easy to actually see the turbulence that's being generated through the leak. And if I shut it down, that leak's going to disappear. So great thing with the camera is now, because I have a camera image, I can take a picture.
Oh, like this?
I can zoom in.
Yeah, I just pinched the screen and I zoomed in.
Yeah, and I can actually hit the little button to take a picture to capture the source of the ultrasound where it's being generated, so at the leak site. Obviously, as I shut that down, the ultrasound was kind of bouncing around between the compressor leak and the actual hose leak here.
So I got an icon here of a file folder. If I just touch on that,
yep, you can now go in and look at your image.
Where am I going to find that here? Oh, there it is right there. Nice. Okay, sorry, I cut you off, but I was just.
But now, once you finish your compressed air leak survey, you can hook up your USB cable, connect it to your computer, unload those images directly into our reporting software, and generate a leak report super easy. So
very cool. Just compressed air leaks, or can I use SonaVu for anything else?
Electrical inspection, fugitive emissions. You can do it for some mechanical inspection as well. It's great for kind of open type bearings, so conveyor bearings, but listen for impacting or increased friction. So lots of things you can do with airborne ultrasound. Listen to couplings. Acoustic imaging camera can definitely be your friend for all things airborne.
Mm-hmm. I just had a thought about an application with the United States Postal Service from about a decade ago, when those digital barcode sorters, which have hundreds and hundreds of open face bearings on them, and you can't put a contact probe on them because they're all open and rotating. They're taking a picture of the barcode of the zip code and then doing all this sorting, but there's hundreds of them. And we'd outfitted them with ultrasonic meters and just a flexible sensor that they could, but now we could train an inspector just to
scan them all.
Just take a picture, and wherever the noisy bearing is, you're going to have that impulse.
Yeah. And you have the ability to put a note right on with the image, so you can capture information about where exactly it is, and all that can be generated into a report.
It's got the wheels turning. All right, so we've been at this for a while. We've run through all of our whole product range, both our permanent condition monitoring and online monitoring, our portable instruments. We've had some excellent feedback from Trig Minnick and Adrian Messer in the field. We appreciate you guys taking the time to join us. I know we were all chomping at the bit to get into conference mode. You even had to cancel your flight down to SMRP, but we managed to get some of that conference energy into the LinkedIn Live. I hope everybody had a really good overview of the products that we can offer you, the solutions that we have for your plant. All your questions can be typed into the comments, and there's lots of ways that you can reach us. So through our website, through LinkedIn messaging, through all of those different ways. We hope to hear from you. Again, if you were in the affected areas of Hurricane Helene or Hurricane Milton, we hope that you were safe. We hope that you came through it well. We're definitely thinking about you and hope that you were able to stay safe. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thanks.